special of 26 Moonshot Podcast. Today, joined by Helen and Helen farm from Sadhana Forest in India, Kenya, and what is the other place? Haiti, right?
Haiti.
Kenya. And we're talking about vegan station and farming, because one of the reasons we get for not having a completely plant-based food system is that we need animal manure to grow our crops, or we need to eat animals for food, and we cannot really have a forest without the animals, or we cannot grow crops without animals. And that's what we want to explore today, and address any doubts people may have that we can live in a completely plant-based food system without having to rely on domestic animals. So I'm going to begin by asking you, Aviram, how did you get started with Sadhana Forest? What is Sadhana Forest, and where are we?
Okay, so Sadhana Forest is an attempt to engineer compassion, to practice compassion, because compassion is something that is very important for us, but sometimes it stays in the world of values and ideas and doesn't practice into our actions. So it's our attempt to contribute to practicing compassion in construction and in growing food and in energy and in any aspect of life. Relationships with people. And we started from a very barren land in 2003, and then slowly learned different techniques of restoring the forest, the tropical dry evergreen forest, and then thought, okay, this works. So maybe we could do this with food producing trees. And then we moved to Haiti and Kenya, and we're growing food forests.
Wonderful. Did you want to share your presentation now?
Yeah, we could share a little bit. Yeah, let me do that. 1 second.
In Sadhana Forest, yeah, in 2018, I think. Late. Was
yeah. Do you see my screen?
hold on. Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. So Sadhana Forest started in 2003, and as I said, the vision is engineering compassion, practicing compassion, and we are now in 3 places: in India, in Haiti, and in Kenya. And we started from India with 70 acres of severely eroded land. And then what happened actually surprised us, because we thought a vegan project at that time on a barren land, nobody would come. But volunteers started coming from all over the world. We have more than 1,300 volunteers a year staying with us now. And it's pretty amazing. Also, the world of veganism, of course, evolved since then. It was a very, a much newer concept at that time. This is the beginning. This is how the land looked in the beginning, and this is after 5 years, and this is after 17 years.
Wow.
So the land basically transformed into a forest, a very diverse forest of more than 160 species. And these are some of the techniques that we used, like on contour swales, which are trenches that are built on the contour on the same topographical height, and basically enable the spreading, the slowing, and the sinking of water into the landscape. So the triple S's, we call them: slow, spread, and sink. This is how it looks after a few months. And this is how it looks a bit later. So the same trench, you can see. But all of this, by the way, is a natural regeneration. There's not been a single plant planted in this area. We just did the contour trenching and left it at that. This is another way of improving soil very quickly. It's called the Keyhole Garden. And basically, you dig a pan and you put some leaves and you plant all around it some plants. And this is how it looks a month later. So very simple techniques, earth dams, gabions. This is a wick irrigation bottle that we use in order to transfer water directly to the roots of the plants. Yeah, instead of watering from above, which causes a lot of evaporation and salinization. So very simple techniques that we're using. This is one method of planting above the ground where you cannot dig, you augment. And all these methods led to an expertise in basically in barren land, restoration of barren lands. And then we thought, okay, what can we do with this expertise? And the most relevant thing is to grow food. This is about oxalogenetic trees that can fix carbon into the soil in the form of calcium carbonate of limestone. These are one of the trees that we work with. The Maya nut tree in Haiti does that very well. This is a permanent sequestration of carbon, which is very good for mitigation of climate change, and at the same time very good to grow food. So yeah, I won't go through the whole presentation, but we started, learning, building, creating a vegan volunteer community. We're a vegan organization, and we have over 1,500 volunteers per year in the 3 countries. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it is absolutely amazing. It was such an inspiring place to visit, when I was there.
Thank you very much.
The community that you formed with the volunteers, and the Friday evenings. Do you still have the Friday evening movies?
Sure.
Of course.
Sure. Since 2008, we're doing that and introducing people to the environment and to, yeah.
Wonderful. So,
yeah.
Helen.
Yes.
I know you have been working on this for, 30 years?
Yes.
So tell us about your journey.
Well, should I share my screen or?
Sure, we can start that, yeah.
Let's see. Okay, I'm clicking on share screen again. And let's see. Well, that's interesting. It's let's try sharing one more time. Nope. Okay. That's interesting. Let me do this. I'm not sure why I can't get it to share. Oops, because here it is down here. Let's see. There it is. Okay, now let's try it. Gosh.
You see? Okay.
All right. The technology is more challenging than working with our biological systems. I just want to
It always is.
Sure.
All right.
For sure.
Now it's still not letting me share.
Maybe you click on it. I mean, you click on the. Do you have an image with a box on it?
There.
Yeah, just click on it.
Whoops. I did that.
Right.
It says stop sharing.
Yeah. Now you're
share for you.
Now you're sharing.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
funny.
I think I have
can't
it now.
see it. But you can see my slides.
Not yet, but it looks like it's coming.
Okay.
Looks like it's
I'm going to
uploading.
do this. And I'm going to do this. Okay, I can see it. Can you see it?
Do you see it?
Not yet.
All right.
It's coming.
Let's see. It says stop sharing, but I'm not getting it to share. I'm not entire. I've got many versions of it up on the.
It's coming. It's now. Now we see it. Now we see it.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. I'm gonna make it larger. How's that? Can you see it?
We see. Okay. Yes, we see it.
Yes. Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. So starting to answer that question, I started out actually in more conventional farming and started my own organic farm in the early 90s and moved over to veganic farming in the early 2000s for just the reason that you were talking about, that I just didn't want to have animals being injured in my system. So I stopped using manures and fish meals and any of the fertilizers that injured animals. So I started in the 2000s, but meanwhile, my husband-to-be had been doing veganic farming since the late 1980s on his orchard in California. So we made a lot of mistakes and had a lot of successes. And together we started farming in California in 2010 and then moved to our present farm where we could really experiment in 2015. And the goal was to disturb the soil as little as possible, do no-till, of course, with the orchard and the trees, the fruit trees and the nut trees, and to have minimum soil disturbance where we grew our vegetables and our grains and our beans. The idea was to have the natural systems, the rewilded systems, look or to mimic our natural systems with our agricultural systems. So no bare soil. So hopefully you can see that the whole farm we're lucky to have runs right along a river, and we can, unlike many places, have plenty of irrigation water, but we then have the responsibility not to pollute it with soil runoff or with any kinds of fertilizers and pesticides. So our system is completely, we grow our own fertilizer, so there's no off-farm fertilizer, no insect sprays, and minimal weeding. We haven't figured out how to entirely get rid of weeding. I hope I live long enough to figure that out, but I'm doubtful. So, whoops, let's go back. So basically, let's see if I can just go back here. So what we're doing is, instead of what I used to do, which was make a lot of compost with animal manures and apply it to my soil, which then on my farm in Montana created large amounts of excess nutrients in the soil, and we started having problems with our crops. So instead of making compost based on manure, we now apply organic plant residues directly to the crop fields rather than spending the time to feed it to animals, collect the manure, making compost, and spreading the compost on the field. And the beautiful thing is this saves all kinds of labor and diesel, and we have, again, no purchased inputs. So the other reason that we're not using livestock is that in my research in biological control, working with natural enemies and particularly beneficial insects, I found that on neighboring farms, grazing animals reduce the habitat for beneficial insects so that there's no flowers for pollen and nectar for our beneficial insects. And we decrease the ground cover carbon biomass for beneficial insects and for soil fungi. Whereas in our system, where we use these living mulches for both fertilizer and habitat, we have undisturbed habitat for soil microorganisms and beneficial insects and birds, and that allows us to, we don't even spray certified organic insecticides or disease control materials anymore, which has been a really lovely thing. So we're using our living mulch, which is a grow our own fertilizer, to create the soil food web habitat. And the beautiful thing is, because we're growing all our fertilizer on our own land, we don't have to import mined nutrients from other people's land. So we don't have to support the mining of other places to make our soil fertilizer. And that gets back to that wonderful idea you discussed before me, which was compassion. And excitingly, over the last 30 years, we've been doing a lot of soil research, and we found that with our plant-based fertilizer system, that we see very improved soil fertility and soil health. And here, after just 2 years of you can see our fertilizer out there, it's basically just hay, that we have increased the microbial community on our farm significantly. The total living microbial biomass is now rated in the excellent range. So we are being able to prove that the plant-based fertility system provides just as fertile soil, and possibly more fertile soil in some respects, than when I used manure-based compost. We're getting very, very good yields everywhere for our vegetables and our fruit. And we're getting good dry bean and grain yields as well. But most importantly, we have a very diverse diet of fruits, vegetables, grains, beans, nuts, and seeds with minimal inputs. And that is perhaps the most important thing. We are realizing how resilient our system is, not having any animals on our system except wild animals that come through. So that's our system.
Fantastic. I mean, it's really, there's a lot of pioneering work that you had to do, but it's more or less remembering what we used to know.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And it's amazing how things grow so well. If you told me 30 years ago, when I was in graduate school studying agriculture, that we could just use plants to make our farming system fertile, I wouldn't have believed it, even though I wanted to. But the more I learn, the more I realize how simple it is if we do the right timing of applying residues. So that's great to know.
Right. And I know there's a lot of learning that you also had to go through, Aviram. I've seen pictures of what you were trying to do.
Yes, a lot of learning. The first learning was how important water conservation is. Because actually in the kind of lands that we're working, water conservation is much more important than the tree planting itself. Because if you do proper water conservation and you manage to reduce even to zero runoff of rainwater, then you have a beautiful forest whether you plant it or not. It will be done by nature. And if you want to be specific and grow specific foods, and of course you can also plant, but the water conservation is the key factor. And it took us one season to realize this, because we didn't do forestry before moving to Sadhana Forest, and we had to learn it a little bit the hard way. But it was a very deep learning, and we've been doing water conservation and training others to do water conservation ever since. The importance of planting, sacrificial planting, chop and drop, cover crops, that has been also a key element in our systems. Once you do the swales, once you do the trenches and the humps, in order to stop the water, you have to immediately plant them with nitrogen fixing plants in order to keep them porous and enable the roots of the trees to enter in, and fixing of nitrogen. We work on very poor soils and with no external inputs at all. So yeah, it's been also learning because we've moved to different places. For instance, in Haiti, we are planting trees in a place where there is no soil at all, not topsoil. There is no soil. Yeah, it's basically a bedrock, a limestone bedrock, and we have to plant the trees in cracks in the rock. So that's a totally different challenge. And the soil is produced very, very slowly by the falling of the leaves, by the biomass, but that takes years. So all the planting has to do through seed clay balls or putting sticks, cuttings in the between pieces of rock and hoping that there is soil underneath that will one day enable it to grow back above the rock. And but it has been successful. I remember when I bought the land for Sadhana Forest Haiti, I bought a small piece of land for our nursery and our center. The guy who sold me the land was sure that I have some problem, because why would someone buy 4 acres of bedrock with not a single plant on it and pay money for that? I mean, but then now when he comes to the land, he always he's like holding his head and yeah.
That's so inspiring. What do you call cover crops? These are the crops that fix nitrogen in the soil.
Yeah, I mean, what we plant on the swales is mainly all kinds of nitrogen fixers like beans and chickpeas and lentils and all these that are relatively fast growing. We let them grow a little bit, but we don't let them produce any flowers or seeds, and then we chop them and drop them back into the soil. So we do that once or twice or thrice, and local people are always blown away by this, because you managed to grow beans, why don't you keep them?
Right.
Let's eat them. But then you cut them all and put them into. But after that, when they realize how much fertility it contributes to the soil, then they understand. I always have the conflict when we have local people cutting the crop with us. They're always so bothered by this, because it just feels so wrong for them.
Right. Right. Yeah, I've heard that that aggressive pruning of trees also helps in building up the soil faster.
Sure.
Is that your experience as well?
Helen,
that's an important part of our orcharding system. The 3 components that we use are we prune twice a year, drop them down into the living mulch area, and then we chop up that branch wood with a mower, and that's what we call the heavy carbon part of the addition, and then adding the green succulent grasses and mowing it and blowing it underneath the orchard in the spring, and then letting it grow for habitat, and then the higher carbon grasses in the late summer and fall. So the wood prunings are a vital part of at least the orchard system. We don't use them for the vegetables and the grains, but and one of my favorite veganic farmers in England grows a coppice forest along his vegetable fields, and you're shaking your head, yes. And then he makes a branchwood compost. So we used to do that in California when we were still purchasing fertilizer and not growing all of our own. We purchased plant waste compost from yard waste and added that. So very, very vital for us.
Right. Aviram, did you want to add to that?
Yes, that coppicing is also a great way to grow firewood in areas where people are very firewood dependent and charcoal dependent. So this is a concept that we always like to introduce to people. You don't have to cut the whole tree, just grow a tree that you can coppice, and then you can produce so much. And if you do a little rotation yard, where you grow some and coppice some, then you have all the time something going on. And because charcoal is one of the main reasons for deforestation in many countries, in both Kenya and Haiti, this is a leading reason, together with grazing, of course, with grazing land. Yeah. And coppicing could be good for grazing as well. I mean, you could grow fodder well too. So, yeah. But we really encourage people to not cut whole trees for charcoal. Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah. Silesh?
Can you hear me now? Yeah. So when you go work in communities, do you sort of look at all of their needs, the food needs, the fuel needs, and then figure out what we're going to help them create?
Yes, we first look at the vision of the people. We first ask them, what is your vision for this land? How would you like to live? Because we don't want to cut and paste our solution, from one place to another. But so in Kenya, for instance, I had conversations with more than 600 Samburu people before we started the project in Samburu County, because I wanted to understand what's alive for them. Then, the second stage is to understand the challenges. What are the challenges? So, for instance, is the challenge malnutrition? And if malnutrition, more specifically, what is it? Anemia? Is it iron deficiency? Is it protein deficiency? Is it vitamin A deficiency? Whatever it is, there are trees that can fix it. There is moringa, the drumstick tree. The leaves are very rich in iron, very rich in calcium. So they're good for people that are anemic, for mothers that are anemic, for mothers that cannot provide milk. The tree is even nicknamed mother's helper because it increases the amount of milk. So we use the appropriate indigenous species. So, for instance, in India, we'll use the Indian drumstick, Moringa oleifera, and in Kenya, we'll use Moringa stenopetala, the African version of it, the East African version of it. But there are trees for every location in the world that can solve the challenges, the local challenges. We just have to identify them and educate people about using them. Sometimes they even have the tree, but they don't know that it's rich in iron. So they have it somewhere growing, but they don't use it. So even that is very, very important to have the nutritional sort of database of the trees. And now we are doing a project in Meghalaya. So we have a list. We made a list of 125 food-producing trees of Meghalaya, of the state of Meghalaya, that are fit for every single elevation and condition and soil condition in the state. And we could give a sort of a kit for every person that wants to grow food trees in Meghalaya. Could just cut the database according to elevation or soil conditions or rainfall.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And you said that you have thousands of people who have gone through your process and and have come and visit every year.
I mean, we have one in India. It's in the place where you visited. There are 1,300 residential volunteers a year staying with us. You remember the big crowd that you were talking to? Yeah. So these were our volunteers and visitors, and we have dozens of thousands of people visiting the project just for a tour, 2-3 hours. So we have a welcomer. From 6 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock in the evening, we have somebody welcoming guests all the time and giving tours to people. Sometimes hundreds of people per day, because people want to see, they want to be hopeful about something that is happening, and it's very, very important. And it enables us to make another connection, which is so important for me, is the connection between veganism and kindness. That people understand that veganism is kindness, not just towards animals too, but it's also kindness towards people. And that's why everybody that comes during meals to Sadhana Forest, we always say, why don't you join us for the meal? And they're, surprised. Oh, how much does it cost? No, it doesn't cost anything. It's vegan food. You can enjoy it with us. Just come and eat. And we feed like this, a few dozens of people per day, extra to our volunteers. And that's so wonderful, because then we can have this discussion about about the animals and the planet, and it's and just enjoy each other's company while not causing any damage. Yeah.
I mean, you are living an example of what Homo ahimsa really mean about that, Judy Carmen. And yeah, I know, Helen, your farm, you produce so much food.
I'm not hearing you. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So in your farm, you produce so much food. I mean, I just got a box of fruits from Julian Bliss because he says we don't know what to do. There's so much fruits here.
Yes. We just like Aviram, we have over the many years tried to get as many different species and varieties in our orchard. And in this orchard, we have 95 different varieties. So we have about 5 to 10 trees ripening every week. And then we can provide food to community-supported agriculture, a CSA, and farmers market. And last year during COVID, when things were so uncertain in the early part of the year, we would just bring things to our local cooperative and give them an invoice with no prices and say, just decide what you can pay us and pay us. And what was interesting is sometimes they paid us more than we would have asked and sometimes less. But it was nice to see how people valued all the antioxidants and the minerals and the vitamins and the nutrients in fresh produce, and were willing to pay for that even in uncertain times. And as you said, the people that come visit the place, we, because we don't have even organic sprays, we have bird nests in all the trees. And people love to come and go through the orchard especially, but also the vegetables, and realize that there's no bare soil and that there's animals everywhere. We have butterflies that are rare, and people can look in the nests and see that little eggs and realize that, my goodness, all bird eggs are different colors. And somehow that connection brings people back to caring about nature and conservation, and not just food, which is vital, but all the other sentient beings that we share our planet with.
Wow, beautiful. Really beautiful.
Yeah, there was a question. Do you ship from your farm? Can we order from your farm?
People always ask me this, and I'm so sorry. I'm getting old, and I'm I'm not growing as much as I would like to. We're teaching others to do it, and
Right.
But I don't ship from the farm. And I really think it's vital, and I think Aviram pointed this out, that we don't import things to our farms, and we try and do things locally because it can be done anywhere. So rather than shipping from my farm, I would love to help you plant your own vegan farm, or help your local farmer develop vegan techniques. One of the wonderful things we're doing here in the United States is working with farmers that want to convert to veganic farming. Right now, I can't figure out how to say this in a nice way, so I'm just going to say it. A lot of small dairy farms are failing. And so we are trying to get legislation and some industry help to and technical help to help these farmers convert from their dairy farms to plant-based farming. And I think that's going to work. You know what they're most afraid of, these farmers that I've been working with? Their soil fertility. They just don't think they can maintain soil fertility without the manure of their animals. And so we've got to get that out there.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Another question is, do you take interns?
Is that to me? Because obviously Aviram does.
Of course, Aviram does. Aviram has volunteers all the time.
I do. I'm kind of out in the middle of nowhere in Eastern Oregon, but I do take interns, and you can share my email if you'd like to contact me about that. Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. I will let people know that they can intern with you at your farm.
And I want to come intern in India.
I was just going to say the same. I wish I could come and intern with you, Helen. It sounds like such a wonderful place, such a wonderful work.
I really love the work you're doing with water. On our land in California, we had a very heavy clay soil and very, very steep, because when my husband was 22, it was the only land he could afford in California. And he built it up, and we did a little bit of swale work. But I think that is maybe one of the most important things that we're not attending to, because we have so much water. We chose the land for that reason. But I think in this world, not only do we need to learn to grow our own fertilizers in place so that we're not importing either carbon or nutrients to our soils from other people's lands, but we really need to understand water, because it's not looking good, is it, for water in this world? So we need to work on that.
It's interesting that there are more than 130 million people in this world that are severely malnourished and have own private land, big tracts of private land. And the main reason is scarcity of water. They don't have water, and they don't know how to keep the water that descends upon them from the sky. So it's just a terrible, paradox. When somebody lives in a slum and they don't have food, you can understand why. But when they live on 5 hectares of land and they don't have food, it's much more difficult to understand, and it's something that is much easier to solve. And that's exactly where Sadhana Forest is positioned to try to address this problem, because most NGOs, what they do is they teach farmers that have agricultural land, that have access to water, a bore well or river or something, to farm better. But we're working with people that don't farm their land at all, because they were semi-nomadic pastoralists, and they're now starting to live more permanently in a more permanent location, but they don't farm the land, and they don't grow anything on it. And we feel so sad that this is happening, and that's why we are trying to start more centers, not just in India, Haiti, and Kenya, but hopefully in other countries as well.
I think that's so important. And the other thing I just wanted to add to that as we build the carbon in our soil with a plant-based fertility system, because that's more of a heavy carbon, the manure-based compost that I used to use, of course they add nutrients and carbon to the soil, but it's a light carbon. The carbon fades more rapidly. So these heavier carbons that we add to the soil are building out soil organic matter. On this farm in California, where the soil was so bad, we improved the soil organic matter from about 1.2% to over 6% with the addition of the wood chips and the
Right.
mowed living mulches. But the beauty of that is that then you use less water. I'm realizing as the temperatures cool here in as we move into fall here in the northern part of the United States, that I haven't had to fertilize, I haven't had to water in 2 weeks because the soil and then the mulching with mowing the living mulches and blowing it into the crops is maintaining the water so well. And I keep looking at the vegetables thinking, when are you going to start needing water? But they're not. And this has been only 6 years of adding the heavy carbon to the soil. So maintaining, saving water, and then adding carbon to the soil.
And it will probably only improve over time.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think
as these things decompose, they will. Yeah.
That's what keeps me going as I get tired and thinking this is too much and I shouldn't be doing so much anymore. I want to see how it keeps changing and what more I can learn from this land.
It becomes a self-sustaining system eventually.
Yes.
Right. So,
absolutely.
And I want to say one last thing about beauty, because people love the fact that we grow healthy produce. They love that there are animals and birds, wild animals, and birds and butterflies and bees everywhere. But what really attracts them is beauty, that we can have something for us that's also beautiful and that allows all living things to be a part. My first teacher, Masanobu Fukuoka, said, farming is the unconditional effort to keep all things alive and growing. And I thought, sure, how hard can that be? I've spent the last 40 years trying to figure out how to keep all things alive and growing on the farm. Phew.
There's one question Jiva is asking, what do you do with soil that has been poisoned with chemicals?
Avram, do you want to say anything? I have some ideas.
No, please go ahead.
Well, so we actually have worked a little with that, because when we were looking at the yard waste, how to use, we have a very different world here in the United States, Avram. People put pesticides on their lawns. You can't believe it. They put neonicotinoid insecticides, systemics into their trees so that those beautiful branches that we have full of life also are full of pesticides. And then, of course, when those things get pruned and mowed and then composted, how do we get rid of those pesticides so that when we use that compost on our organic farms or gardens, that we're not bringing pesticides in? So it does take time, but composting, and this is the one place where I do allow a little minimum amount of tillage, because what gets rid of the pesticides is adding carbon and letting the microbial community work on it, and adding water and oxygenating. So a little bit of tillage, lots and lots of carbon, and you can usually do it in 8 months to a year. In a Mediterranean type climate, in a tropical climate, you can do it much more rapidly.
So the chemicals do break down, is what you're
They
saying.
do break down, and that's why we want to take such good care of our soil food web, our microbial community, because those are our little helpers who are doing all that work.
Right. Right.
Well, one of my favorite soil, Amir Kassam says, he calls them millions of tiny little cows in the soil. doing the work that cows might do above ground. We don't need the cows. We have the millions of tiny little
Right. Tammy is asking, what do you think of effective microorganisms? Yeah.
Avram, do you want to say anything? I have ideas.
Yeah, we have used EM in the past, and they were very, very effective. But we learned to produce our own EM sort of locally, and that's much more specific to our environment. And we have tested it in a lab, and it's very, very effective. So, and we see that it's effective on the land as well. So I don't buy it anymore, but
Okay.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah.
I want to say almost exactly the same thing. We use them on very degraded land, and when I work with people that have very degraded land, I utilize them. But what I really like is to be able to create habitat, and they will come. So understanding what all the different soil food web members require is more the area I'm going now. And exactly, I'm going to just get nerdy and scientific here and say that not only do you have local microorganisms in your soil, but as you grow your trees, you have microorganisms on the leaves as well. And those are the guys that are helping us with our disease suppression. So we want to encourage local soil microbes, local leaf microorganisms. But if you don't have them in your beginning, I'm all for effective microorganisms.
Right. Yeah.
The reason I stopped using them is because most of the people we work with can't afford them. So it's not really a good model, you know, for us. And since we managed to produce an environment that was as effective ourselves, we thought that this is a much better model than telling people you have to buy something that anyway it's not available where they are and it's not affordable for them. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that you're coming saying the same things that we say, because sometimes I feel a little guilty about not encouraging all of these good things out there. But I think along with compassion, or a big part of compassion, is to live simply so that others can simply live. And that means to try and get what you need from your area with your labor rather than bringing it in from somewhere else. So I'm so glad others are coming to that same thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I see so many similarities between what we are doing, although it's such different environments. When I went into this conversation, I thought, wow, how did they connect us? What do we have in common? And now I see that we have so much in common. Yeah.
And what's beautiful about that is that we are so different. I am trying to show conventional American agriculture that there's a viable and sustainable alternative. And as you know, you couldn't be doing anything more different from conventional agriculture. And yet what you're doing is trying to provide food and conserve degraded lands. And yet, even though we have very different goals, our methods are very similar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Fascinating, and thank you so much, both of you, for your service to the community, for the knowledge that you're bringing, and
thank you for inspiring us to do so many things.
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think we're
helping us. Last words you want to say to our viewers before you close?
We don't hear you.
I didn't hear that. Yes.
Okay. No, I just wanted to give an opportunity to say last words before we close the broadcast. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Avram, someday when I want to come visit you.
Please do.
I actually have a project perhaps next spring in Bhutan, working with some women farmers who want to do organic. Actually, they want to do orchards as well as their vegetables and herbs. And so, if I go to Bhutan, I think it's not too far to.
It's not too far, and actually, we are starting 3 more sadhana forests in a place called Meghalaya in the northeast of India, which is even much closer to Bhutan. So by next year, we would have those centers ready, and you could visit us there as well. And I'll be very happy to come there and meet you, and we could share with you what we're doing.
Oh, that would be wonderful. And I would, of course, help. You would just put me to work. I may be old, but I can still work.
I'm sure you can.
Yeah, I'd love to work too. So,
exactly.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you both very much. Yes.
Yeah, maybe it's a beautiful idea to bring some of the people that are involved in veganism very strongly to a little sort of camp where we could work together and really, by doing something very practical, build the relationship further and the inspiration further. Could be such a beautiful. I mean, I love conferences, but I think that being together and planting trees or doing something could be so beautiful.
I think that would be a wonderful idea. When we do workshops on this farm, we do part of it, reading and academic, and part of it, by golly, hands-on, just as you do. But I can think of, a dozen, the permaculture and vegan farmers that I know all in one place. Oh my goodness, wouldn't that be exciting?
That's such a beautiful idea. Let's make that happen.
Okay.
So, thank you so much.
Thank you.